So Kenya has just deported Jesus. I don't know if this is considered racist because we're supposed to have open borders. At least it's what I'm being told by people in the United States of America. You're supposed to just have open borders. But then it's an African country, and the Jesus they deported was white. And does that make them racist for deporting Jesus? Is he supposed to be? But if Jesus actually did come back, where? How would he come back? So anyway, just this article. I'm going to read you guys this article, get some thoughts into it, and I'll be back at the end of the video. So here we go with the article. I have a bunch of tabs open. Some of these are things that, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, some things I have saved. I want to read some of these things, and I was thinking, okay, since I'm going to be reading some of these things anyway, might as well read them for you guys and kind of just discuss them as we go, because I think you might find some interest in them. So here we go. Jesus puts in a Kenya show and it wasn't a class act. So I just saw this earlier and it kind of ties into some of the ideas and things and other things that have been coming up with Jesus, but let's just go into this. So this is by Charles Onyango Obo, and this is in the Daily Nation, which is one of the main newspapers here in Kenya. And you can see they've actually done a pretty good job. The website itself is pretty good. Got the different sections there. You guys can check this out yourself. I'll leave a link below in the low bar for this actual article. But you can see they have like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Telegram. So there's other ways to get in touch with these people and they'll send you news. And I think with like WhatsApp, personally, I know with WhatsApp itself, there was a long time when a lot of people started using WhatsApp here because it was cheaper somehow to use WhatsApp on some programs. You know, like BlackBerry had some kind of deal where it was cheaper to use BlackBerry and WhatsApp than it was to send texts. So there's kind of things now people are learning to use data in different ways, and there's certain things happening in developing countries that are somewhat interesting that if you're listening to this from a developed country and you just think, how did the usage of certain things that you guys might take for granted happen as they came from starting with a telegram, then going to the telephone to the operator lines, and going to the early internet, the AOL, like that noise and things like that, and then getting to the point where there's Wi-Fi, and now there's cities that have just Wi-Fi browsers everywhere. You have things like with Comcast, where if you have a Comcast account, certain Comcast boxes all over the city will be broadcasting for anywhere, so you can jump from one to one to one. So getting to the point now you just have Wi-Fi. We're talking about 5G with the irradiating of people and things. But just think about how that development happened more slowly in certain countries versus now you have a developing country where that technology is already there. So people are jumping all those other steps. No fax machine, no phone call, like rotary dial phone call in your house and things like that. You're jumping straight into that. And that kind of jump is also kind of similar how you see, I think, with religions, because also religions themselves developed in certain ways of governing developed in certain ways. You have these other countries where they're just jumping in midstream on certain things that are already raging and going. It's kind of interesting. So let's just read this article, and I'll just give some commentary as we go with it, because that was kind of interesting. So we have 5 months to go to the end of 2019, but I think we should give the award for Con Act of the Year to the Kenyan pastor who paraded a fake Jesus Christ, and together they took down gullible worshippers for millions of shillings. Now, in Kenya, about, let's just say, for the shilling fluctuates around this, where about $100 is, I'm sorry, 100 shillings is $1. So when you're talking about millions of shillings, it's more like hundreds of thousands, depending on how many. So it's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is still a lot of money. But this is a regular thing. You may be familiar with my channel. I'm a religious, so I don't think people use religion as a con. I think it's a lie. I think it's fake. Most of all the theologies I've seen, I think they're fake. But I think most people are well-meaning. But there's definitely people who know that it's fake. Like, I don't think this guy actually thinks that's Jesus. That's Jesus. That's Mr. Job, aka Jesus of Caesarea. I don't know if that's, we'll see in the article if this Micheal Job, I think, was that Micheal Job? Anyway, I think that's Micheal Job. We'll see who this guy is. We'll see who the pastor is. But there's definitely people who understand that people are looking to religion to get something positive in their life, and they take that positive want that people have, and that positive effect that religion actually had certain religions had. There's a reason we don't talk about Zeus anymore and don't pray to like Ares for wars, because that had some purpose at that time. But we've gotten to the point where like, okay, that we know more, and we're going to retire that and move to something new. And I think it's time to retire these. I'm not saying you shouldn't have religions and things like that. I'd rather we go away from religious thinking in general, faith-based thinking as the important thing to make decisions off of. But we'll talk about that somewhere else. Getting back to this thing. So Credulous, it's abhorrible. I think it's supposed to be abhorrent. I don't know if that's a word. I make up words sometimes, but anyway, it's abhorrible. But one can understand a crooked pastor getting people to drink Dettol and Jik as blessed liquid. After all, they have some antiseptic and cleansing qualities. Even resurrecting the dead, or asking a female flock to attend prayers sans underwear so that the Holy Spirit can enter them without interference of earthly garments. However, Jesus popping up on a Nairobi street like that, one that would have expected even the most credulous not to fall for it, but they did. So these are some things that have happened. Dettol and Jik. Jik is actually bleach. People are drinking bleach. Dettol is a cleaning agent. I really like the smell of Dettol. It's just kind of some antiseptic thing, as they say here, some anti-germ thing. It has a pine kind of smell. I like the soap. Resurrecting the dead. You see, resurrecting the dead. Oh, it's so ridiculous when somebody says it's done now, but then the Bible itself is based off of resurrecting the dead. Other religions previous to that have had the resurrection. So this whole thing where it's saying one would have expected even the most credulous not to fall for it, but they did. It's like, no. By virtue of these people being religious to begin with, believing in the stuff that's in the Bible, already shows that they are people who can fall for these things without actual facts and proof behind it. So why are you surprised? I'm not surprised. Anyway, this whole fake Jesus episode throws up many questions, including yet again, why people believe these things. But the one that interests us is about how Jesus will return, if you believe he will, and where he might land first. The popular version is that, a little aside here, I was thinking, reading a lot of sci-fi, getting back into that, I'm just kind of thinking like the whole like firmament thing, how they say the firmament is in the Bible, or some readings of the Bible say the firmament meant that there was a time when people believed the sky was an ocean itself, was actually water. And I was just kind of thinking something with Atlantis. What if Atlantis was actually a spaceship? It's kind of a cool story. But Atlantis itself was actually a spaceship, and it flowed up into it didn't sink under the sea, but something happened to Earth, and then it actually went up into the sky. So people were thinking that's the firmament. It went up into the sky, and then that's how it happened. That's kind of the arc thing, and you can tie in the whole Jesus thing, where Jesus himself, or this kind of Jesus archetype, is a character that actually went out into space, with a spaceship, and then can come back with a spaceship. But anyway, just some cool side story. I think cool to kind of build up. But anyway. Back to this. The popular version is that first there will be a sign. The Son of God just can't arrive without fanfare. Either there will be huge tremors or storms and he will appear. This is an apocalyptic view favored by people who believe Jesus' return will also herald the end of our sinful world. The religious optimists, however, would see him arriving in a large company of angels. I mean, if a corrupt African president who steals elections can drive around in a convoy of 100 cars, how can Jesus land with a small suitcase at the airport? This Jesus will bestow good things upon the pious and those who hunger and suffer, and lead them to a blissful life. The Kenyan pastors who did the latest trick think what shall return is a garden variety Jesus who dances around in the street and takes selfies. But okay, so for you guys who do believe in this or who have thought of this, what do you guys think that second coming would be? That's kind of an interesting thing. What would that look like in your opinion? Or ask somebody who is of the faith, what do they think? If you're of the faith, let me know what you think the second coming would be like. Would he be familiar with technology and selfies and things like that? Would he start a YouTube channel? Would he be head of state? Would he just, how would it happen? Because the original situation was Jesus came down, supposedly God impregnated a teenage virgin who was betrothed using the ghost self with his human self, and he only stayed in a small town in small area, relatively small area in the Middle East, and that was the only place he actually dealt with everything. But now you have this globalized world. How would it happen? Would he come down as one of the elite and be in this really millionaire family so he could be super popular and fly all over the world? Or would he just be in the Middle East? Is there a possibility where he's out there and then, like, through some military activities, send a drone and you end up bombing the person who's actually, there might be some virgin betrothed in the Middle East right now who just got bombed because they were trying to kill some terrorists, and that happened to be the person that had the second coming. What do you think is going to happen with this thing? I mean, it's just this mixes and ins and outs of these things. But anyway, so back to this. Okay, Jesus' race. I think this is good because I wanted to talk about this. I don't remember all the things I read in the Bible in my youthful years, but does the good book have Jesus dancing or partying? The Last Supper / farewell dinner of Jesus had his apostles in Jerusalem before his crucifixion count. Does that count? I mean, it doesn't count. They're saying it doesn't count. The Last Supper, the partying kind of situation. But there was also that whole part in the Bible where it was between, there was over a decade of his life that he just kind of it's not discussed. He goes off somewhere, then he comes back as an adult. And we don't know what he was doing at that time. So maybe he was kind of experiencing more human pursuits and things like that. He did turn water into wine, so he's not completely against drinking and things like that. And also, how will Jesus reappear? This has many elements. In the recent years, there have been many diverse views about Jesus' race. Will he be white, black, brown, or whatever other hue there is out there? This is yellow. I don't know where Middle Easterners fall into this, because with the Semites, the Semitic people. And this is a thing. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's finish this and see. If he's white, he will not alienate the non-white Christians. If he's white, will he not alienate the non-white Christians who are in the majority now? If he's black or brown, with 20 centuries of Western myth accept him. 20 decades, centuries, yeah, it's 2,000 years, yeah. But you see, it's not Western myth. You see, this whole aspect of Western myth, this is a Middle Eastern religion. Some of this stuff is really mixed up. We saw how the election of Barack Obama was, as a president, unhinged some people in the United States and created a backlash that brought Donald Trump to power. Okay, Donald Trump came to power. I have a lot of videos on my opinion on Barack Obama and Donald Trump, but at least he says some people. And yeah, it played a part, but this whole thing, Barack Obama taking credit, I don't give Barack Obama the credit for Donald Trump. Donald Trump got in the virtue of his own power and abilities, because a lot of reasons. Check out other videos on my channel. But this whole idea, the white, black, brown, I was in university in West Virginia, and I had some friends from some athletes who came and asked me to draw them a black Jesus. And why would white people appropriate this Middle Eastern religion and turn it into this whole white Jesus, blonde Mother Mary? Because you have to understand your target audience. If you want to have pride in a race, in some kind of identity in the culture in that kind of way, then it would make sense that you'd want that God figure to look like you. You have that whole situation. God made us in his image. So if you do think there's actual separate races that, okay, this race is actually completely different from this race, and you're not really understanding, or you're not really viewing it as a human species, then of course the males, since God made us, okay, you could say male, female, so is God a transsexual? Is he just asexual? Is he a hermaphrodite? Does he have both parts? But anyway, at least that aspect of you'd want the God to be in your image. Because if, for example, when the Westerners took it over, when the Romans adopted Christianity and then went from that point where they started changing it more to make something Western in Europe and things like that before it spread around the world, when they were doing that part, they slowly switched the imagery to somebody who was white, who looked like the people they could actually talk to there. I think that's the same reason why the Mormons have their own white Jesus and things like that. And I need to read more about the Mormon situation, because they have something about how the evil people were blacks or different tribes or things like this. Again, just kind of talking off head here. I know there's something to do with actual different races being lesser in the Mormon religion. But if you have Jesus, God on earth in his image, looking like you, then it's also easier for you to be able to, like, yeah, if he looks like us, then we can enslave these other people. Or the Asians are different people, or the Orientals are different people, or the Pacific Islanders are different people. But the main person talking to us here looks like us. God is in our image. We are the chosen people. This kind of idea is understandable. I understand why they do that. Okay, what was I? Okay, back to the reading here. This also goes to the question of where will he appear. A place like the Vatican might look like a natural venue, but that would only be good for Catholics. The Protestants wouldn't have it. And if he showed up in Canterbury, the Catholics wouldn't have it. Canterbury is in England. That's where the Anglican Church is. For you, those of you who don't know, the Anglican Church was started by, I think, King Henry when he wanted to divorce one of his wives. It wasn't giving him a son or just any children. So he ended up, they didn't want her to have a divorce because I think it was the Queen of Spain or something. And she was somehow related to the Pope at that time. And they didn't want to give him the divorce to the Catholics. So he kind of was like, okay, I'm going to start my own church. And he started the Anglican Church. And the Anglican Church is one of the major churches here in Kenya because Kenya was a colony of the United Kingdom. So they brought that aspect, that sect of Christianity to the country. And it's still very powerful here. But you can see how mixed up and twisted this whole thing is. With religions and Christianity so divided, would Jesus really want to return and get embroiled in our partisan religious feuds? Then there's the question of which country. If he can't go to the Vatican or Canterbury, there are more Christians in Africa today than any other continent. And by 2060, 6 of the countries with the top 10 largest Christian populations will be in Africa, up from 3 in 2015, according to Pew Research Center report. Now, this whole situation, I'm thinking with the younger generations, with the access to information, this number is going to crash a lot more. I don't think reproduction numbers are going to still skyrocket as they've been going. I mean, it's not going to be going the same way as people get more advanced, as child mortality stops. People are going to have fewer kids in general as people get more resources, and they understand better that having 2 or 3 kids and investing more time into those 2 and 3 kids brings way more results than having 10 kids and having so little time to actually deal with the upbringing of these kids and the support that you can actually give them and the costs that come with raising those kids in a modern society. So some of those things are going to change around. But one thing about this, I've seen this happen in Kenya, where you have people in Africa talking about how, we need to go back to African ways. We need to go back to these older ways that we had. We need to let go of these things that the modern society, that Western society, that wazungus, that white people are bringing. Yet, some of these very same people are still very religious. So they'll be like, yeah, the modern things that they're doing, like... it normally comes to things like gay rights or using technology or the way kids act to talk to the adults. And some of these things they say are negative for societies, yet they're still okay with the Christianity that was brought over by white people, that white people in general took from the Middle Easterners. And the same thing happens also. People say, like, in Europe, they're like, look, Islam in America, some people say this as well. They say, okay, Islam is coming in, this Bronze Age cult of evil and violence and things like that. That's destroying our society. We need to go back to Christianity, when Christianity came from the same place. So people in the Bronze Age didn't know what they're talking about, but people 600 years before in that same region somehow knew what they were talking about. Make up your mind. I'd rather we just leave general religious thinking behind and move towards more rational kind of thinking. So here, let's see how much we go. Okay, smart fellow. At country level, these are the top 10 countries with the most Christians: the United States of America, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, the Philippines, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, China, Ethiopia, and Germany. So if Jesus chose to drop into the continent with the most Christians, it would be Africa, though perhaps not Kenya, which is not in the lead in the continent. Therefore, we should have immediately smelt a rat upon seeing the Kenyan Jesus. However, if he chose to show up in the country with the most Christians, he would pop up somewhere in America. So how would all So, how would all knowing God arrange his son's return? If all the great things about him in the Holy Book are true, methinks he would arrange a simultaneous appearance of Jesus in nearly all the countries of the world and its big cities. Then he can customize him to suit local conditions, changing his appearance and language. That way, everyone would feel included. They might that might not solve all the Jesus problems. Some sisters reject a male Jesus, saying she was a woman, and at least a hermaphrodite. The same question I was asking before, i.e., both male and female. You see where this is going. If Jesus is indeed Jesus and out there in the heavens, and he is smart, he's a smart fellow, he would likely not want to come back in our complicated mess of a world, a complicated and messed up world. Perhaps it is why fake Jesus really didn't look smart at all. So let's see what one comment here. This is not the first time Jesus showed up in Kenya. Mary Akasa pretended Jesus in Kalangari not a long time ago, and he was an Indian. So this has happened before, and there's a lot of scams that happen here in Kenya. I think I have had an article. Yeah, I did have. I read an article in one of my older videos about scams involving some Christians, some preachers, and this is a it's a rather regular thing. I think you hear at least two or three major scams that happen every year here in Kenya, and that's a thing. That's a thing that happens. So that's it for the reading. So that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. As you saw, there's a lot of other tabs there. I'm going to get to reading some other things, but with just this video, if whether you're Christian or not, let's say just think about some kind of cool kind of short story of how that would come back. How would Jesus come back? One of the groups I'm in on some social platforms was talking about the favorite depiction of God. So just picture God if you were doing a short screenplay or short TV show or just a short story. How do you think the second coming of Jesus would be? One of my favorite portrayals of Jesus, that whole situation, is this movie called A Man from God, and I just heard there was a sequel. The first movie was in 2007 or something. I'm not going to give too many spoilers, but it's a really good take on it. I'm going to watch the sequel. I think after I watch the sequel, maybe I'll do a separate video, just like a short review about it. But A Man from Earth, sorry. A Man from Earth, and then there's A Man from Earth. I'm forgetting what the second one is called. It has some other name after it for the sequel in 2017. I'm going to watch that probably in the next couple of days. If I put up, I'll let you know if I put up a review. But let me know what you guys think. Just short, interesting scenario of how you think the second coming of Jesus could be if it was to happen. Goodbye.